Hello out there. Today I'm going to be showing you how I drew this beautiful succulent using colored pencils. Here you can see me starting on the outline. I am just tracing over the line drawing that I did earlier using Prismacolor and Polychromos pencils on Strathmore Bristol Smooth paper, and this is just the 300 series. I am drawing this on a 9x12 size. So it's a good size succulent. It allows me to get lots of nice details in the final drawing. The very first thing I like to do with almost all of my drawings is to go ahead and block in any of the shadows and highlights. That just really helps the drawing take form and helps me keep my place, start to get a feel for things. And for this particular drawing, I am using a Prismacolor 90% cool gray to block in the shadows. I do not have a green pencil in my Prismacolor Polychromos brands that is dark enough to create these really dark shadows that I was seeing in my reference image. So I am putting a layer of gray down, and I will come over that with my green, and that way I will have a really dark green. I like to have a lot of contrast in my drawings, and the best way to get that is to make sure you have your shadows dark enough and your highlights bright enough. This is all the same pencil, so those lighter areas that you can see, I was just not using near as much pressure. You can also see me starting to add some greens to this drawing. Those are the Polychromos Chrome Oxide Green and Deep Cobalt. I used a combination of greens and blues in this drawing. I really love those colors together. So that's the Chrome Oxide Green that you see me using there. I like to use a combination of Prismacolor and Polychromos in my drawings. It's one of my favorite combos. I'm using a very light pressure on most of this, somewhere between a 1 and up to possibly a 5 in a few areas, but never pressing really hard, not at this point. I was trying to make sure in those center petals that I was maintaining a bright edge around them so that they stood out. I want all of these petals to be separate from each other. You can run the risk when you're drawing a flower that's just one color that it just ends up looking like a big green blob. You want a separation, and you can get that using the different values, so adding shadows or using highlights around the edges, and you can also do that by varying the colors between the petals that are right next to each other. Now I'm starting to add in some of the mid-tone colors, and I just will go straight over the shadows with those colors, blending everything in, overlapping everything together. I was using a lot of different colors in this one. Quite a few Prismacolors, Pale Sage. I was using Sap Green Light, Celadon, Kelly Green. Olive Green was a big one. And then I was using a few more Polychromos as well. Chromium Green Opaque was one. There's some Prismacolor blues that I ended up using. One was Periwinkle. And then another was Turquoise. One of the things that I was trying to capture with this drawing was the appearance of the texture that was in these leaves. I used a few different methods to achieve that look, but one is just by splotching the color around in different areas without completely filling in an area. That way I can go back and add little bits of another color without really blending those colors together. I was also just using dots and dashes, dotting some color around here and there in some cases. And the last thing that I did to achieve that look of texture, you'll see me do here in a little bit, which was to use an electric eraser to pull up some little bits of bright highlights. So a few different techniques there. There you can see me just dotting some of that color around without completely filling in the area. And I'm just looking back and forth between my drawing and my reference image to decide where I want to put those details. Going over that shadow one more time. Sometimes as you block in areas, you realize that the area next to it needs to be darkened up some. It's a layering process, so you don't always get it completely right the first time. That brighter green you saw me use was the Polychromos Permanent Green Olive, one of my favorite colors. I'm also using some Prismacolor bronze around the edges of these leaves. These are just my first initial layers. The petals that you can see here are not finished. I will blend this all with a solvent to dissolve that pencil pigment and get rid of that grainy pencil look, and then I will come back through with more layers. If you did not want to use the solvent, this would be a good one to work on because the graininess of the pencil could be interpreted as even extra texture on these leaves. This drawing took me around 8 hours, which was a lot longer than I had anticipated. I'm usually pretty good at estimating how long something's going to take, but I was off on this one by about double. I thought it would take me about 4 hours. Colored pencil does take a long time. That tiny little tip on the end of your pencil has to cover all of this area multiple times. But I like to turn on a really good audiobook or podcast and just sit and draw. Makes the time go by really quickly. So just take your time. I had to remind myself throughout this one because it was taking longer than I had expected, just to make sure that I took the time to make it good. You don't want to start rushing through something just because you had hoped to be done sooner. but I do usually get a little bit faster as I move through a piece because I start to become more familiar with exactly how the colors I've chosen are going to work together. Even though I've been drawing for as long as I have with these pencils, each project, things turn out just slightly differently. I use a few different pencil brands and a few different types of paper, and things react slightly different depending on all of those different variables. So I start to move through a little bit faster once I get the hang of the particular drawing. I really enjoyed drawing the succulent. I will 100% be drawing more of these in the future. This, I think, would be a great drawing for a beginner to start on as well, because it's very forgiving. If you make a mistake on this, there's so much detail, there's so much going on that nobody's going to notice, and you can add as much or little detail as you want. I added a little bit of brightness onto the edges of some of these petals using carmine red and also terracotta from Prismacolor. I think any of the reds or reddish browns would have been fine. The exact colors you use doesn't always matter so much. Sometimes you find a perfect color that's working really well, but a lot of times you could choose one or another color and it's not going to make that big of a difference in your overall piece. I could have drawn this using a lot more warmer or cooler greens. I tend to like to use the cooler colors in my drawings. Here you can see me blending things out with the Gamsol odorless mineral spirits, and I'm using that to dissolve the pigment. I do this in all of my drawings. In this particular case, rather than trying to blend the colors together, I was just dabbing my brush around just to dissolve the pigment, but I wanted all of that texture to stay where I had placed it. Here's a little bit more of a close-up of exactly what I'm doing here. It just really smooths things out and makes it look a little bit more painterly. And now I'm coming through with my second layers. I have this video really sped up, but this second layer took about as long as the first layer, or the layer before the Gamsol. And there you can see me using that electric eraser to pull up some bits of color. Just really add the details and the finishing touches. I went over this entire drawing a second time. And here is my finished drawing. If you would like to learn how to draw this yourself, you can head over to patreon.com/JenniferMorrisonArt. And there I have a 5-part, mostly real-time drawing tutorial series for this succulent, as well as over 100 other video drawing tutorials, all using colored pencils. It is a Really fun medium to work with, so if you're interested, head over there and check that out. Thanks for watching, guys. Bye.